Hi guys, so I hope you can see me and more importantly hear me. We're just about getting set. We have another minute or two, so we'll let a couple more people get on the call, and we are having probably 700-800 people hopefully participating today in different forms. So exciting times to connect up, although not our regular mode. So this is also a new experience for everyone. So I think we are probably good to start off. So let me welcome everyone. Thanks for the feedback. So that's good to hear. So welcome everyone. I think the first of our lectures, which is online. I think so. COVID has done many things to us. On one side, as all of you or some of you may know, we had our first AGM online, and that's not something we would have dared even think about a while back. And therefore, I think it's really good that we are at this place, and this is something we'll probably think about, how we can, broadcast these lectures and things like that also a little bit globally in the coming times. So I want to thank our sponsors, NTB Bank. As you know, they've been supporting us very well as the Varana magazines and things like that, the Kids Walk. All of that gets supported by NTB, and these are tough times, right? And we really value the continued partnership they're having with us. We have a whole bunch of corporate partners, as you know. The society has come a long way thanks to the support from NTB, NDB, Sampath Bank, Mr. Ajita Di Costa, TJ, Brandix, JK Office Automation, Sparsilon, Colombo Jewelry Stores, and Abans. And, we have many other partners like CJ and the team from Sarva who work with us on the creatives. And many of you will remember that we had an exciting period with our 125th year, the commemoration. So you get a lot of these, the commemoration magazine and those ties and things like that that you saw. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to transact those, but I do hope we can get back to business as usual soon. Interestingly, we launched the last copy of Loris on online, and that's probably the first Loris exclusively online magazine. And I would urge some of you who are overseas to kind of read that. And thanks for that feedback. Yes, we appreciate your feedback, and we are trying hard to keep the society work continually going amidst this time, right? So next week, we are going to launch the Sinhala version, Varna, also online, right? And now one of the things I have to please beg for is money, right? As you know, corporate sponsors are going to have a tough period ahead, but we have very big ambitions in the coming year. I looked at the numbers of who has paid subscriptions just before coming on the call, and I can tell you we certainly don't have huge numbers. So we would please request that all of you pay subscriptions, because that keeps us going. But, last year we had only about 25 members who contributed, 10,000 rupees and more over and above their subscription. We all know that wildlife, we spend lots of money going on trips, photography, all of that. And while these take money and, it's great, it would be a shame, real shame, if the places, the animals that you're trying to see, if they were to kind of disappear after a while. So help us to conserve these by contributing. That's what we ask. And we always welcome new members to join, right? Finally, a lot of our work now happens through the subcommittees. So I would encourage you to read the annual report, our New Look annual report, which is on our website. So yes, the link to the Loris is also on the website, right? So both of these are posted on the WNPS website. So please look them up, and then you can read them. And for some of you who have larger gardens, as you may know, we are doing lots of replantation, especially on the Green Isle project. And we are looking for lots of plants. Whether it's jack, kapuk, mango, tamarind, erica nut, there's a big list, right? So all of you, lots of people doing home gardening and all of that these days, but any of you who have spare plants, please get in touch with some of us, because we are in the process of collecting more and more plants for the reforestation of these areas. Right now, we are battling with a couple of two newer issues spearheaded by the Marine Subcommittee. We've been taking up this whole issue around the beach north and south of Mount Lavinia and some of that filling up, and we are asking the questions of where are the EIAs for this and what is the rationale on which we are doing these. We are trying to see how to protect some of the marine life and the shipwrecks and all of that. So difficult conversations to have, especially during curfews and all of that, but we are trying our utmost to raise awareness and also try to work with the authorities to still find a better balance between development needs and protecting the precious areas what we have, right? We've had some lovely feedback from all the kids, right? The wild in our backyard, this is our 5th week, final week. So far we have about 800 entries, and it's been fantastic to see all the little kids and the stuff that they've been contributing, right? You can join WNPS by downloading a form and fill that up, and we go through a process. Usually takes about a month for whoever who's asking that question, right? Now on the topic of kids, one of the things we just decided last week as a committee was that, like the youth wing, we will set up another wing exclusively for kids younger than 12 years, right? So give us about a month or two. As you know, we have 3 wetland walks that we bring in the small kids, but we want to expand the work we do with kids of that age group. And so we've just taken a decision at the last meeting that we will set up another entire subcommittee for that age range of kids. And so watch this space. Hopefully within a month or two, we'll come back to you with more activities even for the young ones, so that you can continue a journey with us all the way through. And some of you one day should come and sit in this very position and help the society one day as well. That is our hope. Watch out for another interesting lecture on leopard behavior. 30th of May, the youth wing is hosting something. Rukshan Jayawardene is speaking on leopards and on leopard behavior. A lot of you should enjoy that, right? Unfortunately, the field trips are on hold. So I was looking at all those advertisements asking you to come to our bungalows and all those lovely pictures. So, you feel a bit lonely, but we know that, hopefully things will gradually come back to normal. But we hope that things in the wildlife parks don't come back to normal, because we have really seen the difference and the quality of animal behavior. We know that they are getting a well-deserved break, and we hope that when things go back, that there's a better balance between wildlife watching and the respect for wildlife that we have in especially the Sri Lankan wildlife parks. So on that note, I'm going to get to Dr. Priyan himself. So Priyan comes from the same university that I had the fortune of going, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. He's a senior lecturer there at the Department of Forestry and Environmental Sciences, right? So he got his master's and PhD both from Louisiana State University. And so Priyan has been interested in interdisciplinary research related to environmental management and wildlife conservation. So he currently heads the Biodiversity and Sustainability Research Group within the Forestry and Environmental Science of the University of Sri Jayewardenepura. Now, what we are most interested in is the latter part of his, interesting bio. So I'm going to jump to that, right? So it was 2014 when he began this flagship research project on something that, all of us have always been fascinated about, but like mentioned, most of Sri Lanka doesn't know much about pangolins. What we hear most is about how much traffic there are and just how many thousands of animals get sold and trafficked. And sometimes you wonder, where the hell are these animals coming from, right? So he will help us unravel some of these secrets and all of that. This research has had multiple scientific papers published, and as a result, helped in the latest IUCN Global Red List, where, Priyan is also a member of that IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group. So that's a London-based group, and so he's doing the country proud in many ways, but also through this talk, I hope it will bring us an entirely new appreciation and realization of this elusive but beautiful animal that we have the fortune of sharing Sri Lanka with. Priyan, over to you, sir.
Right. Thank you very much for that very colorful.
One moment till we play the video.
Okay. Right. So I guess I can start now. So first of all, I would like to thank, of course, thanks for that wonderful introduction. And first, I would like to thank the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society for inviting me to this monthly talk and asking me to share some of my research experiences and information I gathered so far on pangolins living in Sri Lanka. So in fact, we have planned this meeting in March, I guess, but due to the unfortunate situation, we have to delay everything. And finally, here we are in a whole new environment. We are meeting in the virtual environment. But anyway, I think, and we are, of course, joining from our comforts of our own houses. So anyway, I guess this is how the future is going to be for at least a couple of months, since we can't have any physical gatherings. So yes, so first let me share my screen so that you all can see what I'm going to talk about. So I hope you can hear me and see all the screens clearly. Right. I hope everyone can see my screen. So I guess we are good to go. Right. So when I was first invited to deliver this monthly talk on pangolins, I thought whether to speak something specifically, whether to speak specifically about pangolins' behavior or something, or whether to go general. whether to present some general facts about pangolins. Then looking at the diverse crowds we are getting in a usual Wildlife and Nature Protection Society monthly lectures, I thought it's better to provide some general but interesting facts about pangolins, which we have gathered so far. And I'm pretty sure that if I ask you this question, how many of you have actually seen a pangolin live? I think many of you will say no, right? So I thought it's better to share some interesting facts about the pangolins and what sort of issues they are facing at the moment. And through that, hopefully we can build awareness, and it will contribute in the future to conserve this wonderful creature. Right. So first, let me start by sharing as a person how I got interested in pangolin research. So actually, this is the place where it all started. This is the Yagirala Field Research Center, which belongs to the Department of Forestry and Environmental Science, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, the place where I learned as well as I'm working at the moment. So as undergraduate students, like 50 to 20 years back, we used to come to this place quite often for our field work and research activities. And back then we used to see some wonderful animals like flying squirrels, hog deers, and of course pangolins. And then I joined, I mean, after my postgraduate work, I joined the same university as a senior academic in 2011, and then took over the management of this particular center. And I happened to meet, I visited this place on several occasions, and then realized that some of these animals we used to see back then are no longer out there or have become extremely rare. On the other hand, I was looking for a kind of a flagship species, a suitable flagship species to promote this research center, and of course through that to attract some funds for our conservation activities as well. And then I thought, wait a minute, well, why not pangolins? So pangolins seem to be a ideal candidate. So then I went back and did my homework on pangolins and realized that very little work, scientific work, have been done on this quite elusive and rare species. And all the information out there so far are actually from either Pakistan or India. Not much work have been, or information have been published on the pangolins in Sri Lanka. And when I dig into more information, I realized that they have been classified as endangered globally, and even in Sri Lanka, they are classified as vulnerable. And of course, I have realized that pangolins have made a long journey from our Sinhalese alphabet to the red data book or the red list, right? So once quite an abundant species have become also rare these days. Maybe that's why they have used this species as an illustration in our Sinhalese alphabet as well. But if you go and look at modern day alphabet, you won't see this area or pangolin here. So that's how it all began. Then with that background, I started this pangolin conservation project in 2014. Of course, with a small grant from the Biodiversity Secretariat, Ministry of Environment. And our flagship project had several components, not only research, but we included education and community outreach components as well, because we wanted to present that project as a comprehensive one, because without the community, we won't be able to succeed in conserving the species. The research part basically is focused on understanding the behavior, ecology, and the home territory size, home range, and food preferences, and of course the population size, etc. So that's how my work with pangolins started. Since 2014 today, I've been involved in pangolin research. So if I talk a little bit about the natural history of the species, and as you can see here, the pangolins belong to the order Polydota. But in general, we may think, one might think like these guys are more closely related to anteaters, armadillos, etc. But those animals belong to the order or the superorder Sinatra. But pangolins, from the evolutionary perspective, pangolins are more closely related to carnivores, as you can see in this chart. So globally, there are like 8 pangolin species, 4 in Africa and 4 in Asia. For all these pangolin species are threatened, are classified as threatened by the IUCN, except one African species. So coming back to these Asian pangolin species, there are 4 of them: Chinese pangolin, Sunda pangolin, Philippine pangolin, and of course Indian pangolin. All the other 3 Asian relatives of Indian pangolin have been classified or categorized as critically endangered, but comparatively, the Indian pangolin is doing a little bit better. So if we look at their distribution, they have quite a wide distribution, starting from eastern Pakistan and goes up to Bangladesh, from the north foothills of Himalaya, and of course throughout India and then Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, we have a geographically isolated population of Indian pangolins. So that makes it studying about this species even more important. So in our main research project, what we first tried to do was to come up with an accurate description of the species, because no such morphoanatomical description are currently available for the Indian pangolins found in Sri Lanka. So we observed many live specimens, dead ones, as well as museum specimens to come up with accurate description of the species. So in general, locals call this species as Mallava or Kavallava. Mallava, according to the locals, are like these are 2 different species according to locals. Like the Mallava is quite small, while the Kavallava grows much bigger. But there's no scientific basis on that. Anyway, so based on our information, an adult male of Indian pangolin can weigh between 20 to 48 kilograms and measure up to 1 meter to 1.8 meters from the tip of the snout to the tip of the tail. In fact, the largest Indian pangolin specimen recorded so far is from, the published information is from India, Rajasthan area, province, where the adult male weighed around 32 kilograms. But in our observations, we recorded 2 other male specimens, which are far bigger than this. One is like 36 kilograms and the other is 48.7 kilograms. Then the females in general can weigh between 8 to 15 kilograms and measure up to 80 to 110 centimeters. The species is sexually dimorphic, but the degree of dimorphism need to be further looked at and studied. And even in our morphological studies, we didn't come across any striking differences in their scales or other morphological characteristics to distinguish males and females from outer appearance. So this is one of the better images I have on Indian pangolins, and one I usually use to describe this animal. As you can see, it has a relatively small head, conical head, and a tapering, slender body and tapering tail. But the most striking feature is the muscular, large and thick tail. And that's why the Indian pangolin is also called thick-tailed pangolin. The entire body is covered with keratinous scales. As you can see, these scales are arranged in longitudinal rows. There's a middle row, and there are 6 rows to the either side of the middle one. And these scales provide protection from predators as well as from insect bites, probably, because as you know, these guys are feeding on termites and ants. So when you attack such termitaria and ant nests, they attack back. So these scales help to provide the much needed protection from insect bites as well. So, but the scales are absent in some part of the body, especially the face, neck, and hind side, the belly area, and inner parts of the limbs. And that's probably why the Indian pangolin tend to coil up whenever there's a danger. Indian pangolins, as you know, they mainly feed on ants and termites, and they have this behavior of constructing burrows or digging. So they have special adaptations for these type of behaviors. And if you look at their front claws, as you can see, they have 3 middle claws are very sharp and strong. They use those claws to rip off termite mounds or termitaria and expose the prey. And they also have a long sticky tail tongue, which is approximately like 1/3 of the body in length. And as you can see in this video, to closely observe, you can see how it works on these termite nests, ripping it open and using its tongue to reach out for termites. Yeah, so I mean, its feeding behaviors are very interesting. It's wonderful to see. So where can we find these interesting creatures? So according to our latest research findings, this is the distribution map with latest information. And as you can see, they are found pretty much throughout the country. So it's clearly a species that can adapt to a variety of environmental conditions or habitats. Earlier, it was believed that the species is distributed only up to an elevation of 1,100 meters, but we came across some specimens or the records from much higher altitudes, up to 1,850 meters, and some specimens were from even more earlier area. So it has quite a large distribution, and They occupy a variety of natural habitats such as tropical lowland rainforests, then dry mixed evergreen forests, scrublands, montane and submontane forests, and of course, human modified habitats such as agricultural lands, for example, rubber plantations, oil palm plantations, and of course, rural home gardens even. So they are mainly habitat generalists. They are not restricted to specific type of habitat. Instead, they can, because of their behavioral plasticity, they can adapt to live in a variety of habitat conditions, and that's a plus point as well. So when we talk about the behavior and ecology of the species, still there's, although we have discovered some information about its behavior and ecology, still a lot of information remain as secrets, especially some information like, or the aspects like their territory size and their breeding behaviors, and how they take care of their young ones, and how they use the dens, etc., are yet to be discovered. But the Indian pangolins in general, they have one offspring, and the gestation period is like 65 to 70 days, and the mother tend to take good care of the cub for like 3 to 5 months, and until it can live on its own. Till then, they carry the young one on their back or the back of the tail. So the pangolins, as I mentioned earlier, they are specially adapted for digging or burrowing. So they are called fossoria, right? They excavate burrows for their permanent living, to construct their permanent living places. We call them resting burrows, and also they construct burrows for feeding, as part of the feeding behavior as well. So there are basically two types of burrows: resting burrows and feeding burrows. And an adult pangolin spends most of its daytime inside these burrows, and there's only one pangolin live in one burrow. They don't share the burrow, but in breeding season, there are some records that both males and females are sharing the same burrow. And as you can see in this video, something got caught up in one of our cameras. You can see how they are well equipped and equipped to dig, right? They use their prehensile, thick muscular tail to grip the surface, and also pull out the dirt or soil with their hind limbs, as you can see here. And the front limbs, forelimbs, are used to mainly for excavation. So you can just take a look at this video, how they go about digging. And this is a scene of constructing a resting burrow. Right. So when we talk about yes. So one of the secrets we were able to reveal about pangolins is how they construct their houses or living burrows. In fact, we were able to expose one of their living burrows, the cross section of the living burrow, as you can see in this photograph. Their living burrows it consists of several sections. In fact, there's a burrow opening, and there's a long curving tunnel which can lead, measure up to even 2 to 3 meters, depending on the environment the animal is living. And at the end of the tunnel, there's a resting chamber like this, right? This is the resting chamber, and even the resting chamber wall is concealed with loose earth for extra protection. So that's how their burrow look like, or the burrow architecture look like. And in lowland, tropical lowland areas, they prefer constructing burrows under rocks or rocky substrates. When we talk about the feeding burrows, in contrast, are much shallower. They can measure up to like mostly 1 meter or less than that. And it's in tropical lowland habitats, it's common to see these kind of clusters of openings. And all of them leading to the same termitarium underneath. And from our observations, we also recorded that one pangolin, the same pangolin, can revisit these feeding burrows with certain time intervals. And that time interval can vary from 2 to 3 weeks to a couple of months. Again, this video shows how they explore some of these feeding burrows, checking out, and then nothing interesting, so it's basically going out of the sea. So as we know, this species is predominantly a nocturnal species. So we've been monitoring the pangolins for the last 3 to 4 years using camera traps at the Yagirolo rainforest. And according to our camera trap observations, more than 70% of the photographs we have retrieved have been captured between 11 to 4 a.m. in the morning. So that's probably the period where the species is more active and coming out in search of food. So we also studied the foraging habitats preference and what sort of food they prefer. And I came across this interesting but very nice cartoons on Instagram, I think, from Parrot Fish Collective. Yes, so it's in this cartoon, it's a story about a pangolin couple going to a restaurant in oil palm plantation, and find there's nothing interesting to eat there. And the other one is saying we should have gone to a rubber plantation because they have more variety. And in fact, this cartoon has been based on one of our recent research work, where we compared different habitats. They had the preference of pangolins for different types of habitats for their foraging activities. And we compared like 5 different habitats in southwest lowlands. And the results came up like they have highest preference for forested habitats, followed by rubber plantations, cinnamon plantations, and oil palm plantations, and so on. So the Indian pangolins, mostly in these habitats, the southwest lowlands habitats, they mainly feed on termites. And this was confirmed by some of the fecal meta-analysis we have carried out. And in fecal matter, we also observed that like 53% of the undigested matter are actually grit. So the pangolins may be intentionally or unintentionally consuming or taking up grit, and that may be playing a crucial role in mechanical digestion of their food inside the digestive tract. As we all know, these are pretty, I mean, their keratinous scales are the only form of defense they have. They are not very quick movers, but they are capable of quickly hiding in their habitat, well camouflaged. Whenever there's a threat, all they do is just quickly coil up into a ball and cover their unprotected undersurface from predators. And these keratinous hard scales are capable of providing protection to them from many predators, like even like leopards, but may not be strong enough to survive the jaws of mugger crocodiles maybe. And as you can see here, this is quite a famous photograph on internet taken at Yala National Park, I think, where a mother crocodile consuming a pangolin. So the main natural predators may include leopards, crocodiles, frog bear, etc. But again, we have very little information on the predation rates. All we have so far is like these kind of random pictures, and we don't know much about the actual rate of predation. But one thing we know is their main the main threat for their survival is from none other than humans. In fact, pangolins, the pangolin meat have been considered as a delicacy in many parts of the country, and most of the crimes or killings in pangolins are for these kind of subsistence use or for their own consumption. As you can remember, I talked about recording of the largest two pangolin specimens, and these are the two specimens I talked about. This is 48.8, and the other one is 34.2 kilograms recorded from Puttalam area during a raid, and then they were transferred to, I think, the Kilinochchi Wildlife Office, and we were able to get the basic measurements and collect some data. But since these were the two largest specimens recorded ever in the history, so we wanted to study more, and we quickly contacted the Department of Wildlife Conservation, and they gave us the approval to go and do our further studies. So we wanted to check the gut contents to understand what they have consumed, etc. But unfortunately, by the time we get there, they've been disposed, has been given as feed for captive leopards. So the largest two specimens went kind of wasted, unfortunately. So the other emerging threats for the pangolins include hunting or live capture to sell as meat. As you can see here, one is kept in a box while they were caught by the authorities. And then hunting for scales is another emerging threat. And also there are some unintentional kills like traps intended for other agricultural pests. And if you look at this particular photograph, is a wounded pangolin we found once. As you can see here, there's a huge wound or gash underneath, probably due to a barbed wire or something. So we did what we could do, but it didn't survive more than 4 days, unfortunately. Especially in southwest lowlands of the country, pangolins are considered as pests, especially in oil palm plantations, because they tend to dig around um, oil palm trees in search of insects. So in such plantations, they're being killed and considered as a pest because they are known to cause some sort of damage to the trees as well. In addition, habitat loss, fragmentation, and agrochemicals are all contributing negatively for their survival. Talking about talking further about the threats to the species, and this particular map shows the locations where wildlife crimes related to pangolins have taken place. And this graph shows the blue line indicates the number of crimes, and the red line indicates the number of rescue events by the authorities. So these graphs kind of tell you a few facts. One thing we can observe is the crimes related to pangolins have increased in the country. And at the same time, the rescue events have gone up as well. And this may indicate a few things actually. Probably the pangolins may be increasingly coming into human habitats and getting noticed by the public or the villages. That may be due to the dwindling of their natural habitats and foraging opportunities. So they may be coming to these human modified landscapes in search of food. So, and anyways, this table below summarizes some of the different types of crimes involving pangolins, possession of meat or killed animals, 46 cases, and all these statistics have been recorded, are the official statistics of extracted from Wildlife Department for the last 15 years. So the biggest question. We all know that pangolins are the most trafficked animals in the world. So the biggest question we have is how vulnerable our pangolins to this illegal international trade. And has Sri Lanka already become a source market for pangolin scales? To understand, in order to find answers to these questions, we also looked into all the information related to smuggling events that have taken place over the past. And we also gathered some information from ground level law enforcement authorities as well as from local hunters as well. And unfortunately, according to the information we discovered, we can say that what we are seeing today is actually an iceberg. So there's a lot going underneath and undetected. And these are the few cases where the law enforcement authorities have managed to take action so far. For example, during the recent past, Sri Lankan customs have made 4 confiscations of pangolin scales at the Bandaranaike International Airport. In November 2012, 2.2 kilos of pangolin scales intended to India was captured, and again in February 2017, 11 kilograms again to India. May 2017, 3.8 again to India, and July 2018, 1.7, but this time it's by a Chinese national, and the intended destination was China, of course. And then in November 2017, the largest consignment of pangolin scales were discovered from Kalpiti area by the police. And again, these scales were packed and they were ready to ship to India through fishing boats. Then on May 2018, I think you must have seen this in news. It was out there in newspapers as well. A live pangolin was kept in a deep freezer at a Chinese restaurant in Polpiti, Colombo. So all these cases suggest that the pangolins in Sri Lanka are beginning to, the Sri Lanka is kind of an emerging market for pangolin scales. And this is confirmed by some of the international level studies as well. But according to the CITES, that is the kind of the legal trading of the species, very limited records are there on the trading of Indian pangolins. But it's a well-known fact that Indian pangolins have been trafficked since 2000, early 2000. And according to the international level studies, they have found that the trafficked scales are mainly coming from India, Pakistan, and more recently from Sri Lanka and potentially from Nepal as well. The destination, final destination is obviously China, of course, and the scales are trafficked through Myanmar and Nepal. And the increased exploitation pressure on Indian pangolins could be related to, could be linked to two main factors. One is in Southeast Asia, in China. In that area, all the other three Asiatic pangolin species have become extremely rare because of the overexploitation. So that in turn has increased the exploitation pressure on Indian pangolin. On the other hand, nowadays people get this information through different media, social media, and the information is out there. So whenever people find that there's a market for something, even newcomers join in the party. So a classic example from Sri Lanka is maybe, as you all know, Wallapatta, where once the people realized that there's a market for it, they came in and start exploiting the resource without any control. So too much information at times can affect negatively on species conservation. So what can we do about this species? What are the steps we can take to conserve this wonderful species? So mainly from the scientific point of view, although we have discovered some information, more secrets remain to be unwound. And in fact, personally, we have done myself and our research group have done research mainly on pangolin populations in southwest lowlands, but the larger part of the population lives in the dry zone and intermediate zone. And in fact, we have recently started some work on those populations as well. So there's a lot to be discovered and understood. Talking about the legal protection, I think we have quite a strong legal framework to provide protection for this particular species. We have this Flora and Fauna Protection Ordinance, and we have the law enforcement authorities, Department of Wildlife Conservation, who's doing a wonderful job as well. But unfortunately, as we all know, there are some issues when it comes to law implementation. Possibly due to various practical issues, right? Then raising awareness about the species is something we can do in order to protect this species. And even as part of our flagship project down in Yagirala, we did several workshops for the school children in the area, And we have organized these art competitions and essay competitions in order to inculcate these conservation attitudes in young minds and make them aware about the species, because without the local community support, I mean, any conservation activity is likely to end up in a failure. So from the conservation planning perspective, as we already saw, this species is capable of adapting or inhabiting a variety of natural as well as man-made or human-modified habitats. So just focusing on the protected areas may not help the long-term conservation of the species. Instead, it is much better to look at the problem in a landscape level and include these semi-natural as well as human-modified habitats in the overall conservation plan. And furthermore, these recent incidents on like recent speculations, like did pangolins spread the coronavirus to humans? These can even be taken as plus points to conserve the species. In early February, I think several reports came out suspecting pangolins as the intermediate host of coronavirus, and some publications have come out recently saying that pangolins species are a natural reservoir for COVID, these type of viruses, not exactly the same virus infected the human, but similar viruses. So we can't rule out the fact that maybe the pangolins are intermediate cause of such viruses. But the bright side is we can use this kind of scientific information to pressure the policymakers to end illegal trade and discourage wildlife meat consumption behaviors in certain parts of the world, because of the potential health risks associated with such consuming behaviors. But having said that, these should be done in a careful manner, because there's, on the other hand, there's socio-economic and cultural aspects involved as well. So in conclusion, I would like to say that although we have discovered certain hidden factors or hidden information about pangolins, there are a lot to be discovered. And conserving this species in the Sri Lankan context, I believe that we are still not too late to conserve this species and get them out of the red data book. So this type of citizen organizations, like for example Wildlife and Nature Protection Society, and even this monthly meetings are part of it, I guess. So we can do a lot through citizen conservation science, where you can play an active role in biodiversity monitoring. With that, I will wind up. And so let's raise awareness and protect this wonderful creature for the future generations. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your time and joining this presentation. And I would like to take two questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Priyan. Fantastic. And I think we had a lot of interest. I remember one of the things we said some time back is that some of the work we are doing is we want to take WNPS more globally. And it is very encouraging to see a number of people from different parts of the world also joining this call. So you should know that there's a very interesting group out there from everywhere. So one of the, couple of the questions that people are posting early kind of got answered as we go along, right? But one of the things which people are asking is really, is there a subspecies in Sri Lanka? And, has there been any kind of studies done on that part of it? Can you kind of answer what kind of genetic studies and things?
Yes, that's a very good question, in fact. As I mentioned, we have a geographically isolated population of Indian pangolins. So they have basically no interaction with the species, the same species in the Indian subcontinent. So there could be some a possibility. That's a possibility. And in fact, we have already started a research project looking into the genetic aspects of the species, and so we are planning to compare how close our pangolin are to the specimens found in India and Pakistan. And as you said, there may be there could be some chances of having a subspecies, but we don't know. We have to wait and see. Maybe in a couple of years' time, we would be able to answer that question.
Okay, super. A bit more of a scientific one. Do the scales conform to the Fibonacci sequence? There's a question. I don't know whether we'll be able to take that on.
Could you please repeat that question?
Do the scales conform to the Fibonacci sequence on the pangolins?
Sequence. I didn't.
Okay, so let's keep that question. Do you know any rough
idea? I can say about the scale arrangement.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, there's a central, mediodorsal line of scales. So the scales are arranged in a 13 rows. On the tail area, there's 5 rows. In the body area, there's 13 rows. There's a middle line and 6 lines to the either side of the middle line. So altogether, there are in the body region, the scales are arranged in 13 rows, and on average, a pangolin has like 510 scales altogether.
Super. I'm going to take a question all the way from Nepal because it's nice to have people from out there, and really wondering more around whether we've done enough studies to know about the mating and how long the male and female kind of stay together, and does the male involved in any parental care?
Again, I think I have mentioned that in the presentation. Those are the areas where we need more scientific studies to be done, and in fact, those are the remaining secrets to be discovered. In fact, even in other parts of the world like Pakistan and India, where the same species could be found, still I haven't come across any sound information on those aspects of their behaviors, the parenting, breeding, etc.
Okay. Priyan, any idea of any numbers? Ballpark, anyone taken a guess on what the population is in the country?
Again, the answer is actually no. We have the most. This is a pretty nocturnal animal and difficult to spot. It's really difficult to estimate their population size. But we mainly rely on camera traps and indirect field signs to get an idea of the abundance and the population size. But there are some population prediction models developed by certain scientists where you can predict the population size based on the photographic records, the rate at which you get the photographs of pangolins through these camera traps. So using those techniques, I think we have estimated the population in the Yagirala forest area only, which came out to be like, I can't exactly remember the figure, but for the entire forest, the estimate came around like 250 individuals. That's for an area of a little over 2,000 hectares.
Okay. Right.
Basically, we need more information and have to do sample-based studies all over the country to get a better picture of the population size.
Okay. Super. There's a different question there, where people talk about, these different breeding programs in some parts of the world. Has there been any effort to do those here? Also, do we do any medical testing of the animals that get captured, taking the blood and, looking at the health of the animals and that kind of thing, looking at disease?
As far as I know, there are no other research groups who are working on pangolins. But having said that, you asked about whether there are any studies. I mean, whether we check draw blood samples and all. But as far as I know, we don't do that. But we do have certain places. Some are owned by the Department of Wildlife, and some places are doing it with the approval of the Department of Wildlife Conservation. What they do is basically take care of wounded animals and treat them and probably release them back to the wild. But other than that, I don't think we collect blood samples and check.
All right. So I think, what's out here is that it's an exciting area for a lot of you young researchers because, it's so much more research work which can be done. So I think that's exciting to kind of hear and understand that even after so many years, there's still a lot of scientific research in this small country. How do pangolins control their temperature, and are these scale patterns unique?
The scale patterns, the scale patterns, that's one thing we studied actually. Like on leopards, we can identify individuals because they have unique spot patterns, right, on the face and maybe the wrong area. But with pangolins, we try to discover such patterns, especially the arrangement of facial, the scales on forehead, etc. But we couldn't find any striking features like that where we could identify. So at the moment, what we are doing is how we identify individuals from camera traps is based on other prominent physical marks. Like in some pangolins, some scales are missing here and there, so we can identify the same individual. And with practice, by just looking at the photograph, you can say that's the same animal. So regarding the body thermal regulation of body temperature, they just they spend most of the time in their resting burrows underground, which is in fact we have tested the temperature differences in their burrows and outside as well, and there's like 1.5 Celsius degrees difference in their living chambers and the outside environment. So since yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to switch tracks a little bit. Has there been any evidence of any parts of the pangolins used in Ayurveda and things like that here?
Not in our traditional Ayurvedic medicine, but in India and some other parts, pangolin scales have been used. But the only let's say traditional use. We did some ethnozoological studies, especially with, and during our studies we came across, we also interviewed our indigenous communities, our Vedda communities.
Right.
And they have this traditional use where they use the scales, the powdered scales as an ointment for cattle and wounds in cattle. They make some sort of a medicine using pangolin scales and use it on as a medicine for cattle.
Okay. Do you find areas where, both the Chinese pangolins and the Indian pangolins where they overlap? And if so, do they kind of share the burrows or anything like that?
No, not the Chinese. The overlapping is quite, rare, but I think in Nepal, you have, can't remember whether it's exactly the Chinese pangolin, but there are no such evidence of sharing the same burrows, but as you said, some species occur in sympatry.
Okay. What are the closest relatives to pangolin? And with that, I wanted to kind of restate a question you answered earlier, because people have been asking about anteaters and pangolins and, all of that. So maybe just a small recap on that. Possibly people miss that. And
yes,
on the relatives, yeah.
If I can, I don't know whether people can still see my screen. Is it possible to see the screen?
Yeah.
Right. So I will go back to that slide again. So for those who missed it, so the anteaters and armadillos you talked about, they belong to this Sinatra, the superorder Sinatra. Right? It's right there, over here. But pangolins belong to the order Polydota. So although they may have these armored structures, body structures, and feed on the same type of prey, like termites and ants, these are evolutionary to distinct groups. And instead, as you can see here, pangolins are more closely related to carnivores, in fact. So although they appear like, people, that's a general perception. People think that since all are eating ants and having these similar body structures, all are closely related, but actually they are not. The pangolins are more closely related to other carnivores like leopards and lions.
Super. Lovely. What's this whole nutritional part of termites? How does that whole thing work?
The nutritional part, I think these are like very high protein feed for them. That's why they have, and also compared to ants, and even from our studies, we found that the digestibility is much high. And even when these guys attack the termite area, they first try to access the eggs, because again, those are very high protein, and they have high preference for termite eggs. And ant nests, it's the same thing.
Okay.
So yes. So nutritional wise, I think these are high protein feed.
Okay. Are you doing, or are people doing any work to build up intelligence around the poaching and that side of this pangolin problem? How can people help combat that, and what exactly is going on?
Yeah, actually, in some cases, as researchers, to identify what's going on underneath, we have to get in contact with these ground level people, right, and approach them in different ways. And still we have to do it in a confidential manner. But as you said, at the moment we have not got officially involved in these kind of intelligence networks or anything, but whenever we come across such cases, we report it to the relevant authorities. But as I said during the conclusion of my presentation, we can all play a part through citizen conservation science, right? That's what we are doing here as well, through these kind of nature protection societies, right? We can all take part in, and as citizens, we can, whenever we get to know these kind of situations, it's our duty to report the relevant authorities. And so that's how it works. But at the moment, there's no like network where there's official, communication channels or anything.
There's a gap kind of in the north in those maps and this and that. Is that what is your hypothesis? Is that because we don't have enough research done in that area, or is that?
Yes, exactly. Because of the gaps are probably due to we have in the data collection we have relied mainly on official records of the Department of Wildlife Conservation, and as you know, after the before the war, I think basically we had no information available there. So whatever the information at the moment out there are either our field observations or records obtained from these reliable sources. So it's mainly, I think, probably due to a lack of records, and we can't say that there's not many pangolins living in those areas. It's definitely due to lack of data collection mechanism.
Overall,
but having said that, in Jaffna Peninsula we have not recorded. Even we have done some ground level works, but we couldn't find any records of pangolins in the Jaffna Peninsula area.
In some parts of the world, there's supposed to be, these ticks causing disease, Lyme disease linked with these pangolins. Do you find any of those kind of conditions in Sri Lanka?
To be honest, I haven't looked into that aspect. That's a whole new study area. These epidemiology and related stuff are not an area where I'm much comfortable of. But again, yes. So these are the the research areas that one should work on in the future. There are a lot to be discovered.
So I'm just going to put maybe 1-2 more final questions. One is really talk to us a little bit around the myths in Sri Lanka surrounding pangolins. Does it, myths around people saying that, it gives better milk for feeding mothers, and, sometimes that it gives strength, this kind of thing, any work done on that?
Not in Sri Lanka, but some medicinal properties have been discovered according to the publications in international journals, especially there are some scientific evidences to suggest that pangolin scales do have some medicinal properties like antibacterial properties, etc. But most of these other areas you mentioned about, I don't think that there's much truth in.
So what are the popular myths that you encounter when you're talking to villagers or people like that? What do they say about these pangolins?
The pangolins, and in fact, even some of the ground level people or villages we talk to, they even get confused to who these pangolins are, in fact. And when we keep on talking, or carrying on the discussion, we tend to realize that these guys are talking about something else. Um, Actually, there's very little awareness about or very little knowledge about pangolins. But having said that, these local hunters, they do have a fair knowledge on some of their behaviors, in fact, and where to find them, and on what days they are most likely to come out of their dens. Like they believe that days just before full moon days, they come out more. So those are like what they believe, and there may be they are believing that because that's working for them, right? So yeah. So
okay. So final question. I'm going to bring you back to where we all started off on with all this current situation. So we are back to the disease, right? So now you have on one side a conversation which says that you could have these species kind of getting blacklisted and all of that as a carrier of the disease. On one side, it might reduce the trafficking and this and that. You could have a net gain from that. Other side, how will the people see the species if they get named as a carrier of disease? Would that actually backlash where people could actually look at killing them, saying these carry corona disease or something like that?
Yeah, that's a possibility as well. So that's why I said these kind of issues have to be dealt with in a very careful manner, because it can sometimes backfire as well, as you said. Yes, of course, you can introduce such blanket bans maybe, but you can't, always recommend having these kind of blanket bans on wildlife trade and these markets where they sell bushmeat, because substantial population around the world are living on and surviving on such economic activities as well. But back to what you said, yes. What you said is also a possibility. People can develop a negative perception on such animals, and maybe it can further work against pangolin conservation as well.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'm going to kind of start bringing things to a close. There are a couple more very interesting questions and all of that as always. But what I do like about this is that, there's a very active conversation happening in parallel and people are also contributing. And I think that brings a lot of richness into a dialogue and sharing of knowledge. So I want to also thank the people who've been on the chats for putting their knowledge out here, as well as for raising these questions. And I want to also tell you about an exciting kind of development that we did at the AGM this time, just a week ago. We got the formal approval to start setting up what we have called Plant, which is essentially a trust for preserving, forest areas and, things like that, where if any of you would have a property in remote places, forested or otherwise, that you'd like to see continue for future generations in the same condition, you have the opportunity to kind of look at donating it to this trust. And we are setting up a mechanism so that hopefully one day we'll have a lot more areas in this country which remain privately held havens for wildlife. right? So we are counting on lots of people to kind of contribute to these. And among those places, you heard the emphasis on, old estates and things like that. Simply by donating an old estate, a rubber estate which somebody inherited, rather than sell it off for some funds today, you might find that, you're helping to preserve lots of species, including species like this. There have also been people who have been offering to help support WNPS to counter some of this trafficking on the chat and privately to me on this chat. I appreciate all of that. Like I said, we need a lot of help from the membership. And together, I think there's a lot we can do to kind of make sure that Sri Lanka doesn't become a hotspot exporter for pangolins. So thank you, Priyan. I think it was very, very informative. People are giving a lots of very lovely comments and appreciation to you for, bringing all this to light. And let's hope that we can continue on the same vein and, let's stay in touch. I hope you remain very closely engaged with us. And thank you for deciding to focus on such a, lesser known topic, right? That's very brave of you and very pioneering. We really appreciate that. And with that, I want to also thank our sponsors, NTB, Adisha, all of them. I saw they were posting questions. We have a number of sponsor partners from the different banks, friends, donors, researchers, lots of friends who are posting questions. So it's lovely to see. So it feels like we are almost together again, and I hope very soon we'll be back here. Somebody's saying it's worth staying up in Sydney to listen to this, so that's great to hear. And so look forward to catching you guys soon. And we have a chat coming up at the end of the month on leopards, so don't miss that. But our next formal session is likely to be next month, most likely. We are going to have that on a live session as well, because we don't want to kind of start accelerating the trend, and we recognize the challenges of social distancing. So we will probably run it in this format for the next month. Please do visit our website, because there's lots of stuff around the magazine, the loris, the old lectures are all live off the website. So there's a lot of rich information on the site. Do that as well, and we hope we can catch you. And as always, I want to thank our organizing committee who puts these wonderful sessions together, number of fantastic people, and I won't get into names, but please, when you get a chance, give us feedback on how these things are going, thank them, and we look forward to staying in touch, right? So good luck, good night, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, till we meet again. Thanks, all the best. And that's the leopard behavior session by Rukshan, Saturday 30th, 10 o'clock via Zoom. So good luck, all the best. Thank you very much.